I'm Rick Welsh. I coordinate an Aboriginal male-targeted suicide prevention service in Mount Druitt in Western Sydney, which has got the largest Aboriginal population anywhere in Australia. The service that I do coordinate, we only have 2 staff members, so 50% of the staff are here today. But we've had to work very smart around trying to see what we can do to help people in the community. So we've actually got 28 separate partnerships established with different types of organisations, and the way that we've developed this, the way we've had to develop is to look at, or the framework that we use that is around the social determinants of health. So with the legal sector, we find that in terms of suicide and suicide prevention and suicide ideology with Aboriginal people, is that there is a lot of interaction between Aboriginal people and the legal sector. I'm sure I'm not going to have to sit here and start spitting out statistics around child removal and incarceration rates. But one of the things that I do have a great interest in, and a lot of the volume of Aboriginal people that we do interact with, is around child removal, or the care and protection system, and we look to do a lot of work also with early intervention cases with family law matters. So on that, I know that from the information that and I never went into to run this service, and I didn't think there was going to be so much interaction with the legal system, but it's just worked out that way. So with Aboriginal children, one of the things that I've had to do a lot of finding out about and research about is, and one of the things that we've come to is the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and in particular in those conventions, the rights of the child is Article 30, of which Australia had become, or Australia ratified it back in 1990. Which Article 30 reflects or talks about an Aboriginal child's right to participate in their culture with people of their culture. The laws within Australia from that period, it seems to come out, and in particular when you look at New South Wales, the Care and Protection Act, and you look at Chapter 2, Part 2, Section 11 to 14 of the New South Wales Care and Protection Act, it talks about Aboriginal children's rights to be able to learn and participate in their culture. But one of the things that I've found is that through interaction with clients and interaction with legal practitioners, is that it seems that there's a strong reliance within the legal sector for Department of Family and Community Services, or DOCS, or whatever name they change. It seems to be a new name every year or two. But in that sector, it seems that the places that I think there could be improvement for the legal sector is to look at developing Aboriginal cultural contact plans between parents and their children, or family members and their children, so extended families. Aboriginal culture, we have extended and large families. And when you look at those cultural contact provisions, it doesn't just mean that it's for mum and dad. So if mum and dad are unsafe for the children to be having contact with, there are extended families that can be involved in that contact. And that's in the care and protection system. And the family law system, there's also the provisions in there, which is Section 60cc, 3H1, that look at also looks at to develop cultural contact plans for Aboriginal children. So one of the main things that we're seeing is that the legal practitioners in the family law sector, as well as the care and protection sector, there doesn't seem to be enough interaction with clients, or there's no discussions occurring around cultural contact. And what we're seeing coming out of facts in terms of that cultural contact seems to be as simple as to say that the child should attend a NAIDOC event once a year, and that they should also just watch NITV for a few hours a week, because that'll help them learn about their culture. And the Aboriginal culture has a lot more to it than that, and it's got to be about those people, Aboriginal people from those respected areas and respected nations. I think that another part of it, and what we've managed to, I think in some instances, do well at the Shed, is to look at, so we have a couple of legal partnerships. We have one with Legal Aid New South Wales, where we have family law early intervention outreaches. And we also have a great partnership with the Public Interest Advocacy Centre in providing a homeless people's legal service outreach project with us. And I think that what in terms of Aboriginal people and improving access to justice, it's really got to be about trying to have the legal sector interact with Aboriginal services and Aboriginal organisations and people at the local level. I think a lot of the time it's actually being missed. And that with those collaborative arrangements, things can actually change. So you can look at New South Wales as a state. There are also state Aboriginal peak organisations that look particularly, when you're looking at therapeutic jurisprudence around interactions and the community infrastructure. So Aboriginal medical services, for instance, is most Aboriginal communities in New South Wales have them. Local Aboriginal land councils, which could also be involved in the development of Aboriginal cultural contact plans at local levels. There's 120 local Aboriginal land councils across New South Wales. And we talk from big places like the Metropolitan Land Council like here to smaller places like Pilliga and Barradine that have small populations. Quite often they've got a population of about 400 or 500 people and about 1,400 dogs in their towns. So it's very small places, there's still a great infrastructure there for Aboriginal people. I think that legal services in some sense need to be embedded in Aboriginal community controlled organisations, or that they look to establish relationships with the legal sector. And when I talk about the legal sector, I think as well as legal practitioners, also with the judiciary in those communities as well. Because I know from the shed, what we've done is a part of what's happened is that we've, over time with the development, so I look at the suicide prevention side of it, I look to build or take person-centred approaches with other organisations. So with this project that I run, this service that I run, we have a roster of services that come in on a particular time and particular days, so we can wrap services around people to meet their needs, because quite often when people are interacting with the legal sector in particular, there's usually a number of other things that are going on in their life, like homelessness, debt, all those types of things. So we're able to wrap those services around people. But one of the other things that we've done is established an Aboriginal Family Law Pathways Network where we've got judicial representations from a number of the jurisdictions. And what we've done is gone out to deliver what's called Aboriginal Family Law Roadshows. And in general, we have a federal judge involved in it from the family law system or the Federal Circuit Court. We have some videos that we play of local court magistrates, and we talk about early intervention points for Aboriginal people to try and divert people away from that care and protection jurisdiction, but also to look at minimising interaction with crime, because if we can work with a therapeutic sense towards people to heal, to move away from those addictions like drugs and alcohol and things like that, is that we need to do those things at local levels with local arrangements. And with the federal court, we've done those, with the Aboriginal Family Law Roadshows, we've done those in a number of communities across New South Wales. We've done Broken Hill, Tamworth, Lismore, Sydney's in the five Aboriginal communities in Sydney. And that's something, so what we're looking at trying to do is establish better relationships between those jurisdictions and between the Aboriginal communities themselves. So with those roadshows, it's also got to a point where we're helping those Aboriginal communities and the judicial officers develop Aboriginal family law pathways in those respective communities, so that way we can look at having better outcomes at a local level, and that Aboriginal people and Aboriginal services play a role and have ownership over what's occurring in their communities, so that they can look to address those issues within their own communities with the support, and to take a strategic approach to it with judicial officers and the legal sector. So I think I better quite quiet there. We got a bell a minute ago.
Yeah, thank you. I'll ask you this question. Do you see a specific need for training of lawyers, and for lawyers to have a particular expertise in dealing with or working with the Indigenous community?
I think there is. I think there's a need, because quite often, with some of the people I work with, particularly the judicial officers, they can see that there's the provisions in the law for things like Aboriginal cultural plans, but I think there's the discussions or the training's never been really organised for lawyers. So I think that would be, firstly and foremost, would be a great step to look at some training around in the legal sector for lawyers. But I think as a part of that training as well, it's not just to get those lawyers and have them do a course and sort of sit them somewhere. I think it needs to be something that's embedded locally. So, you know, things like local law societies, to look at having relationships with Aboriginal communities and services. You know, because the more remote you go, there seems to be more representation for Aboriginal people. Because Aboriginal people have a preference to stay on country. So, you know, if they're born in a town, they're generally going to die there. So it goes through its life course. So I think it's something that needs to happen at a local level.
It's not happening with the universities at the moment. They're not offering any courses?
No, not what I can see. But I think a lot of it needs to, that those conversations, like I said, that I'm Moriwari from northwestern New South Wales, in which our nation have a different culture and different things that may occur as opposed to another Aboriginal nation somewhere else. So I think you couldn't necessarily do just one set training for lawyers everywhere, unless it was, you could have some involvement from those other Aboriginal nations.
Thank you. Any questions?
You talked a bit about interconnectedness of mental health and debt and you know, legal issues. Do you think there's a need for lawyers to understand that better through training, or is that more the
I think
nexus
there
you provide?
And the reason I say that with the service, the reason we've got so many partnerships, and we've got partnerships with everything from mental health services to financial counsellors and all sorts of things, is I think that all those different sectors and professions are all siloed off from each other, so I don't think there's enough interaction between those sectors to be able to get the people on the ground the outcome that they need. And I think if there's more of a collaborative arrangement, but in saying that, I know that there's a justice health partnerships going on, but what I've seen at the ground, because I think that's something that we've been doing for a number of years at the shed, because we've had those relationships and we've been able to build it. But I think that's why it needs to be embedded in local areas, because they'll know what's going on with local area health services, Aboriginal medical services. It's got to be because the infrastructure can change from community to community, so it needs to be done, that type of thing needs to be done at a local level. But quite often as a suicide prevention service, when people do come through our door, it's generally legal problems and mental health problems would be the combination that's most common.
Any other questions? No? Mr. Welsh, thank you very much for coming along today.